Pay now, pay now. Have you ever received a threatening call from a creditor? It's unnerving. China owns about $1 trillion of US debt. So what would happen if China were to call in its debt and demand immediate payment by the US? Will it be end of the world as we know it? Will it lead to a US default, economy collapsing, and chaos all around? And most importantly, does this give China economic leverage over the US? Well, such worries are often based on misunderstanding of sovereign debt and the dynamics of economic relationship between the nation. The truth is that the foreign countries purchasing sovereign debt is a very normal transaction that occurs every day in the global economy. Thus, China's stake in America's debt actually has a unifying effect on our countries rather than creating tension and stress. To understand the situation, let's begin by understanding US debt and China's role in it. The United States has accumulated a staggering amount of debt over a period of time, about 31 trillion at the time of recording this video. A significant portion of this debt is held by foreign countries, and China happens to be the largest holder of this foreign debt, owning about $1 trillion in US Treasury bonds. Now here is where the scaremongering comes into play. Some people claim that China's holding of large US debt gives them immense leverage over the US economy, potentially allowing them to hold us hostage. While it is true that China's position as a major creditor gives them some influence, the reality is far more nuanced and complex. First of all, calling the debt does not mean that the debt is due immediately. See, US Treasury bonds have set maturity dates, which can range from several days to several decades. If China were to call its debt, that would mean they are demanding payment before the maturity date. However, such a scenario is highly unlikely because it will disrupt the global economic system and damage China's own economic prospects. Even if China were to consider calling its debt, using debt or credit as a coercive tool is a highly complex and very restrictive process. And most importantly, a creditor can only dictate terms to a debtor country if the debtor country has no other option. In case of United States, the American debt is a highly sought after and valuable asset in the global economy. If China were to sell its holding, other countries will readily purchase them. For example, back in August 2015, China decided to reduce its holding of US Treasury securities by $180 billion. Despite the scale of this sell-off, it hardly had any impact on the US economy, thereby limiting any influence on the US decision making. Moreover, it's important to recognize that China needs to keep significant reserves of US debt in order to maintain the effective exchange rate of renminbi, its national currency. If China were to suddenly unload its reserves, the value of renminbi would increase significantly, thereby making China's exports expensive in all the foreign countries. They simply can't do it. Additionally, China's holding is just a fraction of the total US debt. Even if they were to sell their entire portfolio of $1 trillion debt, it would mean that only a smaller portion of the overall US debt is actually coming to the market to be sold. The US Treasury market is broad and diverse, with a vast range of buyers, including other countries, institutional investors, and even individuals. Therefore, any impact due to China liquidating its holding is likely to be absorbed by all these other buyers. Therefore, the impact of China trying to liquidate its overall holding also is likely to be absorbed by all these other buyers. It's important to understand sovereign debt is an important financial instrument that serves multiple purposes for both creditor and the debtor nation. For China, holding US debt provides a safe haven for their excess liquidity and provides stability to their own economy. Meanwhile, the United States benefits from this foreign investment, helps fund government operations and stimulate a lot of economic growth. Countries accumulate foreign reserves for various reasons, and these reserves serve important functions in economic policy and stability. There are 4 key reasons why countries choose to hold foreign exchange reserves. Countries that engage in international trade or have investments abroad need foreign exchange to facilitate these transactions. These reserves act as a buffer against sudden change in international investments or exchange rates and provide liquidity to these transactions. Sovereign debt, which is typically issued by government, is generally considered a very low risk investment because they are backed by the government. Its stability and reliability makes it a very attractive investment for central banks and other institutional investors who are looking for low risk, stable investments. A fixed or pegged exchange rate is a monetary policy choice made by countries to minimize the volatility in their currency's values. By purchasing foreign assets like US debt, countries can influence the demand and supply of their own currencies in the forex market, thereby trying to maintain the desired exchange rate. Central banks often maintain foreign exchange reserves to ensure countries' ability to service its external debt, short-term debt in particular, in the time of crisis. These reserves serve as a form of insurance, providing confidence to lenders and investors that this country can service its debts even in terms of some crisis or challenges. It's important to remember that countries like China have their own reasons for investing in US security bonds. Selling off such holdings en masse could potentially harm China's economic interests and could destabilize its own economy. China's large foreign exchange reserve, partly accumulated due to constant surplus in the current account, help prevent large cash inflows due to trade and investment that could really destabilize its domestic economy. China's significant holding of US Treasury bonds also reflects US standing as a global economic powerhouse. US debt is a highly sought after asset worldwide. It's considered safe, convenient, reliable, and liquid. The US dollar is world's reserve currency. It's used extensively in global transactions with practically everything priced in US dollars. The US Treasury market offers liquidity and provides a safe and secure investment option. The United States has never defaulted on it, which further enhances the attractiveness of US bonds as an investment option. It is important to note that China's purchase of US debt is not driven solely by economic factors. It also carries geopolitical implications and reflects the dynamic of US-China relations. The large holding of US debt by China signifies the interdependence of these two economies and also establishes US as a major trading partner of China. While US debt continues to be very attractive, economists have expressed concerns with such reliance on external debt financing and the potential risk associated with sudden stoppage of capital flow into the United States. But these concerns are not specific to China alone. They kind of apply to all the financial actors in this global economy. Now, looking at the regional perspective, Asian countries in particular, including China, hold a large amount of US debt in response to the 1997 Asian financial crisis. During that crisis, several Asian nations experienced a sharp decline in incoming investment, leading to economic instability. In the aftermath, several countries like China, Korea, Japan, and the Southeast Asian countries adopted policies to build and keep foreign exchange reserve to manage such scenarios in future. These reserves, which include US debt funds, serve as a rainy day fund to ensure stability and confidence. These policies actually proved very beneficial during the global financial crisis of 2008, and Asian economies in general were able to recover much quicker. From a national standpoint, China's purchase of US debt is driven by its complex financial system. The Chinese central bank needs to acquire US treasuries and other foreign assets to try and limit the inflow of cash into its economy and cause great inflation. This situation is somewhat unique to China, as it saves more than it invests domestically and typically acts as an international lender. However, this system has its own drawbacks, and it causes lower return on investments for China. Chinese firms often borrow abroad at higher interest rates, while China lends to other entities, foreign entities, at a much lower interest. Despite these challenges, China continues to buy foreign assets, especially the safe and secure US Treasury bonds. And here is the kicker that should make you relax and not worry about all our debt being called. The majority of US debt, around 70%, is held by local institutions and financial actors which all operate within the United States. US Treasuries are highly regarded as safe, liquid, low-risk store of value, making them very attractive for all financial actors. These include banks that seek to hold reserves and other financial institutions that are looking for low-risk investments for their portfolios. One of the largest holders of US Treasury securities among the domestic public actors are the government agencies, including Social Security. Almost a third of total outstanding US government securities are held by these intra-government agencies. The Treasury Department is legally required to invest Social Security tax revenues in US guaranteed or US issued securities, which are managed within trust fund. The Federal Reserve, which is the US central bank, holds the second largest share of US treasuries, which amounts to about 13%. The Federal Reserve buys and sells different kinds of financial assets, which also includes treasury securities, as part of its open market operations. These actions are theoretically aligned with ensuring the right supply of money which matches the economic conditions. For example, by buying assets like treasury bills from banks, Federal Reserves can inject more liquidity into the market and thereby stimulating the economy by encouraging lending by these banks. Apart from Federal Reserve and Social Security, other US financial actors also hold US Treasury securities. These include state and local governments, mutual funds, insurance companies, private and public pension funds, and US banks. These actors typically hold US securities as low-risk assets within their portfolios. Foreign countries collectively hold a relatively smaller portion of US debt, while China's holdings have accounted for around 20% of the foreign-owned debt of US security. Looking at the overall picture, it's typically accounted for only 5 to 7% of the overall outstanding US debt. It's also worth noting that China's holdings have decreased in recent time, even falling to less than $1 trillion in 2022. At several times, Japan has surpassed China as the largest foreign holder of US debt. This pattern of domestic ownership of sovereign debt is common globally. Most countries, including United States, see their sovereign debt bond held locally by domestic investors. In Europe, European financial institutions hold majority of European sovereign debt. And in Japan, again, local financial actors hold more than 90% of the Japanese sovereign debt. So, while there is great demands for US sovereign debt worldwide, US is following international trend of domestic actors holding majority of the outstanding debt. Now, while China's debt holding may not be an immediate threat, we should not neglect the more and bigger underlying issue, the ballooning US debt. That is something that needs to be addressed. The current US debt is more than 31 trillion. To help you visualize how big this debt is, consider this. This amount of 31 trillion is about 230 million times more than the average median mortgage that somebody like you would own on their house. It's equivalent to about $94,000 being owed by every single US citizen. Yes, that includes you. The ever-increasing debt puts strain on the economy as ever-increasing interest payments starts consuming a significant portion of the national budget. It limits government's ability to invest in education, infrastructure, and other important areas of the economy. This could lead to higher borrowing costs for the government and ultimately impact the overall economic stability of the nation. It's important for the United States to address its fiscal policies and work towards reducing the fiscal deficit. By doing so, the United States can preserve fiscal stability, maintain and preserve its global standing, and ensure a prosperous future for its citizens. So in conclusion, the idea that China's holding of US debt gives them some overpowering influence over US economy is frankly overblown. While China does hold significant amount of US Treasury bonds, calling them is unlikely and will have very limited impact. However, the ballooning US debt itself poses a significant problem and that needs to be addressed. By addressing the underlying issues and implementing responsible fiscal policies, the United States can maintain economic stability and ensure a prosperous future for its citizens. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll like this thought-provoking discussion as well. Check it out.